to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Ain't been so brotherly up there when it comes to the Sixers organization, though. A few weeks ago, as you all know, James Harden in China had some interesting comments about his general manager, Daryl Morey. And he said it twice. He repeated himself in China. This is James Harden about Daryl Morey. He said, quote, Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. And he said it twice for the people in the back. This was James Harden at an event in China. And so this came right after the Sixers had announced that they were no longer exploring trade options for James Harden. Remember, James Harden opted into his $35.6 million contract for this upcoming season. He could have opted out and been a free agent. He opted in, and he opted in with the belief that the Sixers were going to trade him. And so that's where I want to start when I get into this topic. James Harden is obviously pissed off with Daryl Morey because Daryl Morey has not traded James Harden yet. And it's two sides to this. On one end, I understand why the Sixers have not traded James Harden, because they want to get equal value for his services. You don't want to trade James Harden for pennies on the dollar and not get anything in return. Remember, this is a Philadelphia 76ers team that was one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals appearance. So they went 7 games and went toe-to-toe with the Boston Celtics last year in the Eastern Conference semifinals. So they're not that far off. They're not that far off. And they still got Joel Embiid, the reigning NBA MVP. And they brought in Nick Nurse, a championship head coach. He won a championship back in Toronto with Kawhi Leonard. So the Philadelphia 76ers are a contender not only in the Eastern Conference, but in the NBA overall. So they don't want to trade James Harden and not get back equal value and it have them be a worse basketball team next season compared to what they were this past season. And that's possible because it's reports about how Harden wanted to go to LA and play with the Clippers and join Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But I'm trying to figure out, like, because when it comes to Harden as a player, I'm going to talk about him here shortly, but I don't know if what the Clippers have that they can give the Sixers that can have them in the same position heading into next season that they were last year. I don't know. But also, on the other hand, I'm not so sure that James Harden is a star player anymore in the NBA and a piece that you can win a championship with. Like, when you look at James Harden over the last few years, he has not been the same player. Look at James Harden in his points per game ranks the last 6 years. This is James Harden points per game ranks the last 6 years. In 2017, he was ranked first in points per game ranks. In 2018, he was ranked first in points per game ranks. In 2019, he was ranked first in points per game ranks. He then transitions to Brooklyn. In the 2020 season, he was ranked 21st in points per game. In the 2021-2022 season, he transitioned from Brooklyn to Philly. He was ranked 27th in points per game. And last year, he was ranked 43rd in total points per game. What is James Harden known for? Scoring. When James Harden was in his prime in H-Town, James Harden was one of the elite scorers in the NBA and one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. Even if you don't like his style, James Harden was an elite scorer of the basketball and can score at an elite level with some of the best players in the NBA when he was in H-Town with the Houston Rockets. He was able to score with Steph. He was able to score with Kevin Durant. He was able to score with LeBron James. James Harden, when he was in his prime, was an elite scorer. And now, over the last few years, he's dropped to 21st in points per game rank, 27th in points per game rank in the 2021 season. And last year, he was ranked 43 in points per game rank, 43rd last year. So I don't believe that James Harden is the same player that he compared to what he was before. Like, James Harden is not an elite player anymore. He's not. And I told my cousin this last year as the Sixers were playing during the regular season and they got to the playoffs and they beat the Brooklyn Nets in the first round in the Eastern Conference. I told my cousin last year, I said, when you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, because I like the Celtics. I like Jason Tatum and I like Jaylen Brown. And I don't apologize for it. I'm a fan of those brothers. But I said, heading into that Sixers-Celtics series, I told my cousin, I said, I fear Tyrese Maxey more than I fear James Harden. And lo and behold, in the Eastern Conference semifinals, James Harden was pathetic in games 2, 3, 6, and 7. Now, he played well in games 1 and 4 for the Sixers. In that game 1, remember, game 1 was the game where Embiid was out, and James Harden and the Sixers upset the Celtics at TD Garden. And James Harden had a sensational performance. He was great in game 4 as well. But in game 6, a game when Jason Tatum was struggling, couldn't throw the basketball in the ocean. James Harden came up small in that game in Philly. He followed that up with a horrible performance in game 7 in Boston at the TD Garden. Time and time again, we've seen James Harden come up small when his team needs him the most. I remember that one year when he was in Houston, the Rockets were going up against the Spurs. In that game, the Spurs didn't have Kawhi Leonard, and it was in the playoffs. In the playoffs, the Spurs were up 3-2 over the Rockets. It was game 6 in Harden's house in Houston. Game 6, no Kawhi Leonard for the Spurs. And the Spurs blew out the Rockets by 40. And in that game, if you remember, James Harden shot, I believe, like 2 of 11 from the floor. He was pathetic in that game. Completely awful. And then the one year, remember the one year when they were against the Golden State Warriors, the Kevin Durant Warriors. Kevin Durant, was he injured? I can't exactly remember. But in that game 7, remember they shot all those threes. They missed all those threes. And they lost Chris Paul in that game, in that series. And James Harden didn't step up in that series. So time and time again, when you look at James Harden and his playoff performances, he has always came up small. And the craziest thing about all this is Daryl Morey and James Harden have always had a great relationship. When James Harden was in Houston, Daryl Morey did everything for James Harden. When James Harden wanted Dwight Howard, they got Dwight Howard. When James Harden wanted Chris Paul, they went out and got Chris Paul. When James Harden wanted Russell Westbrook, they went out and they got Russell Westbrook. So everything that James Harden wanted, he received from Daryl Morey. Remember when they was going through the situation in Philly where they were trying to get rid of Ben Simmons? Everyone in their mama knew that Daryl Morey wanted James Harden in Philly. Everyone knew it. Everybody knew it. And so I just think it's crazy that James Harden and Daryl Morey relationship is what it is today compared to what they've been in the past. They had a great working relationship. Great relationship. But again, I think Harden's upset because Daryl Morey promised him that he was going to trade him once he opted in to that $35.6 million, and James Harden's not going to get traded at this point. And I think James Harden's upset about it because he doesn't want to be in Philly anymore. But I also feel like, too, part of me feels like Harden's upset because Daryl Morey is not going to pay him what he thinks he deserves. And I'm sorry, if I'm Daryl Morey and I'm the Sixers organization, I'm not paying James Harden top dollar or superstar money moving forward either. You're not going to get a whole lot of money. If I'm leading the Sixers, I'm not giving James Harden a big contract with a lot of money. I'm not going to do it because James Harden, A, is not a star player anymore, and B, he is on the downside of his career. His best days are behind him. So, like I said, I think that Harden's upset because he's not getting the money that he thinks he deserves, and he's also mad because he opted into that money, and Daryl Morey allegedly promised him he was going to trade him, and at this point, the Sixers have said that they no longer are interested in trading James Harden. But I do think that the Sixers are making a mistake. I think they should try to trade James Harden. Again, I don't know if they go. The problem is you don't want to get pennies on the dollar, but I don't think his impact is so significant to where there's going to be a significant drop-off next season compared to what they were last year. I just don't. I don't believe in James Harden. I don't think James Harden is a star player anymore. I think you should build around Tyrese Maxey and build around Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is your best player. He's the best player. Now, the only issue I've had with Joel Embiid is his playoff performances. He performs in the regular season, but in the playoffs, he doesn't. Last year, in the regular season, Joel Embiid averaged 33 points per game. In the playoffs, he averaged 24 points per game. So that's a 9-point drop-off from the regular season to the postseason. Cannot happen when you are the reigning NBA MVP. Cannot happen and you're the number one option on your team. So I expect more from Joel Embiid moving forward. But if I'm the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm trying to do everything I possibly can to move off of James Harden. Now, again, I'm going to try to get the most I can for his services, but I'm not bringing James Harden back to training camp, and he's pissed off. We saw it in Houston. When he was ready to leave Houston, James Harden showed up to camp out of shape, and quite frankly, he didn't care anymore about producing for the Houston Rockets once he wanted out. So I just think it's time for the Sixers to move on.